Hello everyone, welcome back to Pixel Village and I'm Radha Krishnan. It's been quite a while since we've uploaded a video. Many reasons. We've been doing the final touches to our academy. Finally, the academy is up and running. We have students here learning photography, filmmaking, and all that. Yes, it is an offline academy. And of course, the weather was really bad. October, which is supposed to be a hot month in Pune, was completely wet. I mean, it's been raining, literally, the cats and dogs scenario. So, one good thing was that the October was not hot. I mean, it was wet, all right, we could manage. The heat was heat. Typically, a October heat kind of goes up to about 40, 42 degrees centigrade, but this time we got saved. And now we are, as you can see, we're already into the winter. It's pretty cool and comfortable in Pune. So these two reasons, we couldn't really get out and produce some videos. But one bad thing that happened was our view count started dropping down. So please help us to reach that million mark. We are at a stone throw away from that magic million mark. So please subscribe, share. We don't usually say that in our videos, but please help us reach that mark fast. Thank you very much. What are we talking about? We're going to be talking about iPhone now because that's the flavor of the season. iPhone 14, 14 Plus, Pro Max. And okay, the reason why is that I've been using this old phone. You know, this is the OnePlus 6T, which I bought, I think about 4.5 years back. I've been using it. We've been producing a lot of videos using this, but then finally it has started, kind of slowing down. You know why the reason is. Reason is not me. Obviously, it is the firmware. There is a rumor saying that the firmware upgrades actually slows the machine, and probably there is something that the brands and the makers of the phones do to make the phone really go slow. Well, anyway, that has happened to this phone, and eventually I started feeling the need for an upgrade or changing the phone, and everyone in the office, wanting me to buy the all-new 14 Pro Max. He said, you saved money for, you didn't spend for, not saved, you didn't spend for the last 4 years, so use that money to buy the best that is available now. The 14 Pro Max was their suggestion. So finally, I decided to give in and spend some money and buy a new phone. And the question was which one to buy. And there were lots of new phones. These days, obviously, when you buy a phone, you're not actually looking at phone to make a call or store some numbers or take some notes and stuff like that. The primary attraction is the camera. Everybody knows that, and because of which there are certain camera brands which I know personally. They said 6 out of their 8 research centers across the globe is researching on the camera. Remember, it's a phone company researching on camera. So that being the scenario, well, eventually everything narrowed down to that camera for our decision. And we are photographers and we make films, we make videos, we make digital content. And that's where, our comparisons eventually kind of became between deciding which one to buy based on the camera capabilities. And of course, there are cameras, as you know, which are 200 megapixels and 64s and 108 megapixels. And of course, then you have the brand new 14 Pro Max, which is giving 48 megapixels and of course also shoots 4K ProRes videos as well. And the consensus was 14 Pro Max for many different reasons. Biggest reason is that I have been an Apple user since 1989, which means I started my Apple journey with Apple IIFX, one of their early desktop computers. I have used almost every model of their computer that has come out ever since. the Centrises and the G4s and the G5s and their, the original iMacs and subsequent iMacs, the 21s, the 27s. We have about 3-4 in our editing room, and the laptops. I mean, I've been a loyal Mac user for obvious reasons, because I've been a photographer. I've been doing a lot of graphics work, Photoshop, film editing. So I naturally levitated towards, the Apple 14 Pro Max. And comes in the logical old photographer in me, comes in with a lot of questions, which is what I want to pose or present in front of you. The comparison was to whether to buy the 14 Pro Max at the current price or a 13 Pro Max, which was available at a discount in that store. I was weighing the pros and cons, and I was definitely going to make a cool 30,000 rupees, that is 30,000 rupees saving, if I buy the 13 Pro Max, the 128 GB version. Now, I need to rationalize why I should spend that 30,000 rupees additional to buy the new one. Do I really need it at all? When I looked at it, the biggest advantage of the 13 Pro Max, besides having a better screen and a newer chip. But I was not really fancied by those two aspects, because any iPhones that you buy will very comfortably see you through for about 5-6 years. If my Android 6T can last for about 4.5 years, the iPhone can last much longer. In fact, I have a working iPhone 4S and a working iPhone 7 Plus with me, perfectly working. So I have no doubts about that. It's just that logical old man in me, the old photographer in me, who was trying to ask these questions. The first question is, do you really require 48 megapixels in a mobile phone camera? My answer is, you don't. So the 64s, 108 and the 200 is actually out of question. You don't really need them at all, period. For me, if you ask me, the best option would be an 8 megapixel camera, 12 at best. Well, that makes the 13 Pro, the 13 Pro Max as the best contender. For, as far as I'm concerned, I'll put my money there. The reason is that the 48 megapixel, which actually adds to the maximum amount of cost escalation or increase of the newer phone, you seldom shoot it at 48 megapixel. Unless you choose to shoot the Pro RAW, you don't get the 48 megapixels. And they actually do something called pixel binning. They combine 4 pixels into one and shoots and gives you a 12 megapixel JPEG or the high resolution, the HDR image, if you decide to not shoot the RAW. So what's the big idea? If you shoot RAW, the image size is going to be 3 times bigger. Okay, 3 times bigger than your regular JPEG. Which means if you want to keep shooting your 48 megapixel image all the time, then instead of buying a 128 GB version of the phone, you should ideally will have to buy a 512 GB version of the phone, which straight away takes your phone price to stratosphere. Well, if you don't want to use it, and you wanted to use it occasionally, then I would rather, encourage you to spend that additional money on a small camera like this. This is probably a couple of years, probably more than that, year-old Canon M200, currently available for about 30,000, 35,000 Indian rupees. Used market will be much cheaper. This will give you a way better photo and video than that. And this is what I would recommend if you are buying the 14 Pro Max for photography. There is an old saying, I know, I also have said that the best camera is the one which you have with you. You can have this with you. all the time in a small bag if you are getting out to do it. I'm not inventing reasons here. I'm just telling you these are the reasons why I went and bought a 13 Pro Max and saved decent bit of money. Now, this is the 128 GB version. I shot a lot of stills and a lot of videos. This is not going to be a comparison one. This is going to be giving you logical points why a 13 Pro Max probably is better than the 14 Pro Max. So let me ask another question. Why do you need a higher resolution like 48 megapixel? Well, if you ask a photographer, he will say you require higher resolution if you want to capture more detail and if you want to show a big size image, like a big print, a big digital print. Correct? Which needs to be, I'm not talking about the billboards, I'm talking about an exhibition print which you can watch from a close proximity. Instead of a 14 Pro Max camera doing all that mathematics and giving you a 48 megapixel image, I would rather encourage you to shoot a JPEG with your 13 Pro Max at 12 megapixel, use your Photoshop's AI to increase it, blow it up to whatever size that you want. There is a facility or there is a feature available in the new Adobe Photoshop. If you remember, even the iPhone 10, the iPhone X images were up in the billboards. If you're talking about size and if you're talking about billboards, the 12 megapixel images were on the billboard. The 13 Pro Max images were on the billboard. So 48 megapixel, you know that it's 4 times overkill. Correct? It will be useful for you only if you want to make big, large prints for your home, for your walls, or if you want to send it for an exhibition where people will watch it from close proximity. If that 48 megapixel is going to go into your social media, I'll say you're doing a big mistake. Because social media works very differently. Whatever that you put in, it's going to optimize to suit that particular space, which usually 1080 by 1080 or 1280 by 720 or at best in full HD. And if it's video, YouTube takes 4K, for which 12 megapixel is all that you require. You don't require anything more than that. And if you happen to feed a much larger, higher resolution or a big, large image onto Instagram, for example, all it does, the optimization algorithm, it kind of diagonally reduces it to fit it into that small space, which also means that it will add a whole lot of unwanted sharpness into your image. Now, sharpness as, let's say, an untrained or uninitiated photographer sees and a photographer, a practicing, experienced photographer sees are two different things. Too much sharpness is not the sharpness that you and me are talking about. Your eyes don't see that kind of sharpness. Everything is exaggerated. Well, you also, in the 14 Pro Max, you will also pay for the additional software, the hardware-software combination called the photonic engine. You pay for that as well, which basically does a whole lot of stuff to your image captured by those fine pixels, which is 1.2 microns. It obviously, I mean, the physics guys will tell you that smaller the pixel, lesser the amount of light that it can take in. Well, now how do you solve? You actually compensate it using your AI, your software, your hardware-software combination. So photonic engine works with your new processor, the A16, and compensates for all the limitations that that sensor may have. This is the scenario as we speak. I don't know about tomorrow. Maybe there will be one much smaller pixel which can take in a lot of light and gives you amazing images. I am not denying that it is a possibility, but as we speak here today, the 48 megapixel is an overkill. if you are really keen on producing great quality image, you can definitely do it with a 12 megapixel camera. I also want to talk about video because phones are used for video definitely. So the biggest attraction in the 14 Pro Max is the action mode, the gimbal mode which is there in that, and it makes the image extremely smooth. Let me tell you, that is possible purely because it's got a much larger, more resolved, a sensor. And what camera does is, of course, it's not a secret that it is digitally, kind of managing the image. It's called digital image stabilization. It's not an optical stabilization, it is digital image stabilization, which in certain modes, when you turn and things like that, can create undecided warping in the corners, which also I'm sure will be fixed by the so-called photonic engine, but at low light conditions, it will give you a lot of grief. This is what I think that will happen in that video. Whereas a 4K video is just over 8 megapixels is all that you require, and the 12 megapixel 13 Pro Max will give me amazing images. It also has cinematic mode. It also shoots pretty reasonably good steady shots. Of course, it doesn't have the action mode, but if you want to really shoot action with a mobile phone, I think you will be better off doing that with a small handheld gimbal. Which is these days about 3,000-4,000 Indian rupees, 5,000 at best, using which you can actually take a very low, running shots with 14 Pro Max. And if you want to run and take a very low angle shot, the other option would be to fit, let's say, a small tripod, a kind of a monopod, a selfie stick onto it and run with it. In which case, if you notice, when you are running, your camera will never be parallel this way. Correct? It will keep shifting up and down. It's quite possible, and which will give you undecided results. Whereas if you have mounted your mobile phone onto a gimbal, then in that case, the gimbal will make sure that your camera is always kind of vertical and you get your shot very nicely. So two big ticket items that actually add to the cost of the 14 Pro Max can be kind of overcome by clever usage of a 13 Pro Max and use it effectively. In the bargain, you will end up having a nice, good camera which you can use for a very long time, and also a gimbal, right? Using which you can take some fantastic action shots too. And besides this, there are lots of videos in the internet which actually shows you the 14 Pro Max don't really perform optimally under low light conditions with all the hardware and the AI and the photonic engines and all that put together. Let's see a quick demonstration. Now, these are my logical reasoning. My logic need not be yours. Correct? So, you have all the right to choose what you want. It's consider this an old man's rant. Let me put it this way. If I want to buy a Ferrari, then I want to be sure that I can actually take it to a racetrack or at best a very good road with no traffic signals, and I can ride it at a decent speed or a high speed very comfortably and safely. Here, by buying a 14 Pro Max in this condition and underutilizing all its features, I think what we're doing is buying a Ferrari, but drive it only to buy milk in the morning. That's all that you're going to do with the 48 megapixels. Forget the 64, 108 and 200 megapixels. Makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Bye for now.